Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Too Heavy Wrestling Podcast. First off, welcome back to Mr. Eddie. He's been gone for 2 weeks. We really enjoyed having Clayton sit in for him, but
Did
we
a
have more
fantastic
surprises
job.
this episode, as I'm sure you're able to see by now. You have myself, Randy, you have Zach, you have Eddie, but also my good buddy Joey Galizia is
Woo!
joining us here today.
Hey, boys,
Yay!
thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, man. We really appreciate you taking the time to come in and talk to us about some good old wrestling.
Please, it is a pleasure to join the Too Heavy podcast. It is my pleasure.
All right. So as we go through this, kind of like I have everyone introduce themselves, Joey, I want you to tell us just about your earliest wrestling memories. Like talk to us about what got you into pro wrestling in the first place.
The very first wrestling I saw was actually a Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair match in WCW. Having had no idea who these two very non-famous wrestlers were.
Yeah,
And this
Hulk
was
who?
yeah, exactly. And Rick something.
Rick something.
Yeah, this was Hogan's already in NWO at this point. I'm probably like I don't know, it's 1996, so I'm probably 7 years old.
Yeah.
And just saw this thing, and and I don't even know if it was just because it's the two of them, but I saw these guys fighting, and it was huge, and it was theatrical, and there was 1,000 people watching these two guys fight, and I said, "Wow, I don't know what this is, but I'd like to watch more of it." And that sort of was the first memory that then kickstarted a lifetime of fandom.
Wow. So is it safe to say that you were more of a WCW kid during that time, or did you quickly discover WWE after that?
You know what? I knew about WWE. I watched both. Monday Night Wars. I was flipping on Raw and I was flipping on Nitro, but I was a WCW boy. I loved Sting. I loved Goldberg. I loved the NWO. I loved it all. I loved DDP. Like those were my boys, and I love the Luchadors. Flight of the
Yeah.
Cruiserweights was some of my favorite matchups to watch. Your Dean Malenkos, your Ultimo Dragons, and then of
Yep.
course Rey Mysterio Jr., who I guess did some things else in his
Yeah.
career.
He's all right. I hear he's doing something somewhere. So
That kid's got a great future. He's either
yeah.
18 or 70. I don't know anymore.
Yeah, I don't think he does either at this point.
Yeah.
Well, here, kind of going into that a little bit. What was your first earliest pay-per-view that you could remember? Was it WCW or was it WWE? Like, what was that first pay-per-view?
Are we talking about pay-per-view that I watched or pay-per-view that I attended?
Ooh, let's do watched first.
Okay. The first pay-per-view, honestly, and this is not a troll answer, the first pay-per-view that I remember watching was Over the Edge 1999, even though I was already a fan at this point. And it's because of what happened. I was watching that show
Yeah.
live and thought,
Wow.
oh, very, very strange that we never got this Blue Blazer match. Oh,
Yeah.
here's a shot of all the fans cheering this guy that we didn't see any of this happen.
Yeah.
And then of course Jim Ross giving the call. And at
That's
that age,
crazy.
yeah, at that age, I think I was 9, turning 10, and I think that
Yeah.
was like one of my first real lessons about life and death.
Wow.
Truly.
Right.
And that's like, and I probably watched shows prior to that, but I mean that's the first one that comes to my mind.
That's crazy. That's a
Yeah.
crazy first pay-per-view. What do you guys think?
Oh my gosh. I I wasn't even like alive yet, so having to
Or
experience that, dude.
Stop. Just stop. Don't
But
remind
I
me.
do kind of want to branch into that other
Yeah.
question for first pay-per-view you attended. I feel like that's pretty interesting too.
You know what? The first pay-per-view I attended wasn't until I was much later in my 20s, but the first live event I went to was a WWE SmackDown in Las Vegas at the Thomas and Mack Center. And this might as well have been a pay-per-view because Vince just came back and wins the
Yeah.
title at the end of the night thanks to an assist from his
Oh
good buddy Stone
no.
Cold Steve Austin. Uh, it was a tremendous show. I mean, this is now 1999. This is, WWE. This is what I'm watching. Excuse me,
Yeah.
WWF at the time. Now, at this point, WCW is like not only losing in the ratings, but is like
It's
not
in a
even,
decline.
it's in a decline. It's half of the product that it was at this point.
Yeah.
What we got, and then obviously this is the high rise of WWE's Attitude Era. Like the Rock was still coming out to do you smell what the Rock is cooking as
Yeah.
opposed to if you smell.
Mhm.
But man,
Which is a very
yeah,
clear line in his timeline. Like
yes.
like it's kind of like Metallica's Black Album. There's the do you and the if ya. Like
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
that's
That's
where that
true.
split is for the Rock's career.
It's
Yep.
do ya,
Oh.
if ya, and then when he got COVID, can ya?
Can you?
Mhm.
Perfect. All right. Well, Do you guys have any other questions for Joey before we get started? We got a lot to talk about.
Do you have one?
No,
Or
I'm good.
I kind of wanted to ask too. Who is your favorite wrestler to hate, and like kind of to give some context
Like
to that?
favorite heel, kind of.
Favorite heel, but like someone you could not like you just hated them so much, but you couldn't stop watching their matches.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember specifically where, it was Kevin Nash. Kevin
Kevin
Nash
Nash.
ended Goldberg's streak in the dumbest way. This was my first memory of when I
Yep.
thought, wow, wrestling is pardon my
Wacky.
language, very fucking dumb. Where I was like, wow, dude, this guy hasn't lost. He's unbeatable. This is my dude. Oh, I'm gonna shoot this man in the chest with a stun gun.
Yep.
And like after that happened, like not only was I pissed that it happened, but I was pissed that it was Nash that did it.
Yeah.
And to this day, he could sit on his high horse and be like, oh, I'm the guy that ended this streak. But, just thinking about it makes me want to pull my quad out like he probably did doing it.
I was gonna say also to this day, if you listen closely in the wind, you can hear a little pop. And that's
Yeah.
Kevin Nash's quads giving in once again because he decided to get out of bed.
It sucks because I love Nash. Like I love it. I love him now. He's like this cool old like stoner dude that loves the boys and took care of him and obviously did a lot to the business. But yeah, at that time I hated him.
Well, I think a lot of us hated Kevin Nash for stuff like that in particular. Just the very, I don't want to say selfish, but he just wouldn't put people over. Him and Hogan at that time just could not, unless it was for each other, finger poke of doom and all that, just would not put anyone over.
Yeah, that's the again, this is when that moment happened, you could really tell the lifeblood of WCW was going down. It's real sad because man, I love going back and watching that peak era of WCW. 96, 98 is some of the best wrestling you'll ever see.
Yeah, and I mean you could always go back and check it out at this point. But if we're gonna talk about people that aren't putting anyone over, we can go ahead and start talking about Roman Reigns at this point, right? So I actually got a very specific text from my buddy Joey here after WrestleMania, and it was very specifically in all caps, "Put me on your podcast. I have something to say." That was he texted me that night. And so on this episode we're going to be talking about Cody Rhodes' current booking, we're going to be talking about Roman Reigns, and we're going to talk about the draft a little bit just because that seems to be everything that's going on right now. But we can start with Roman Reigns because at this point I think what everyone wants to know, I want to get your guys' thoughts first. Not to bring back Bill Goldberg into this, but who's next at this point for Roman Reigns?
Who can be next after that? Like, if we're going to be honest, like
it's a short list at this point.
It's a very short list, and the people who could beat him aren't getting pushed, in my opinion, at least. So that's kind of what I have.
It like the biggest thing that I got from everything, or at least this next string of road that we're going to be going down, is that it's going to lead to a string of bloodline matches and eventually back to Cody. Because, I mean, the draft can do a lot of things to give Roman another set of opponents, but he literally has both rosters right now, so it's not like the draft really could do much.
It's very true.
That's a good point. Joey, what about you? Who do you think's next for Roman Reigns?
I don't care.
Wow, that's a good answer.
I don't care in a way because he has been doing good enough work where whoever it's going to be, I will believe that they could make a good story out of it. Who it should be, Seth. Who I really want it to be, Gunther. But does it matter because it seems like they're just the plate is set for Cody to come back with this story that they're telling. So those are, if there's one that really has a legitimate argument to be made, Seth did not lose at Royal Rumble 2022. I don't know why this is never brought up. I don't know why he doesn't go out every week and say, "Hey, I beat your champ," and he doesn't want to fight me again. It's pretty easy there. So
I hate to interrupt you, but he's got a match with Almost. He's got to worry about.
Oh,
that's
my
true.
God.
That's true.
I forgot about that.
Listen, Roman Reigns could take a back seat to the wrestling god Omos. Okay, that's my main event right there. Okay,
wrestling god Omos.
Okay, you can have your bloodline versus Zayn and KO. You could have your Roman versus your American Nightmare. Okay,
Almost
almost
Saphians,
Seth.
rise.
They don't need.
Hmm.
They don't need to put another match on the card. Let them go 3 hours. They
Are
can
we
do it.
gonna
Seth Rollins versus Omos for 3 hours.
are we gonna have
Book it.
another
Mhm.
just a banger of a match by Omos and he doesn't win? Are we still gonna keep pushing him just for him to lose?
It depends on who's at the booking table right now because we
Yeah.
know
They haven't
Vince
even
McMahon
said
is
why this
booking.
match is happening.
It's happening because
They
shut
never
up. That's why.
interacted on TV.
Because
Ever.
big guy draw money. Look how
Big guy-
big that dude is.
Big guy versus little guy draw
I
more
bet you that's
money.
why
Big
Seth
guy
walked
versus
out,
little
like,
guy. Yeah,
the
David
week
versus
ago,
Goliath.
and they're
This
like,
is-
okay, we're
the
gonna
tale
announce
as old
this
as
now.
time.
Mhm. Well, I mean, we gotta. I look. The next person for Roman Reigns
They
at this
Oh,
point,
stop.
do you know what happens
Has
next,
to-
Joey?
it has to be Nia Jax. The bloodline story is there. She's in the
Mhm.
family.
Mhm.
He's already beaten Jimmy and Jay.
Mhm.
It's either Solo or Nia, and I think Solo's busy right now. Nia Jax versus Roman Reigns. Book it.
Here's the problem with that. Roman don't want the smoke. Okay,
He
knows Nia's gonna come in. She's gonna throw that haymaker. She's gonna bust up that pretty face.
Shoot. She's gonna shoot
Break the
punch his
bricks.
nose right off.
Mm.
Just a quick break.
Oh, I'm not.
She's gonna punch him so hard that his hair will be dry when the match starts.
Oh my god! Just punch all the water out of it.
Yeah.
Catch it in a water bottle. Drink it.
Mhm.
Oh my god.
It'll be like the special stuff in Space Jam. Like she'll punch him so hard that an animated movie will be made from the 90s.
Just an animated Nia Jackson Roman Reigns.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think actually the next step for Roman Reigns, if he can get back from injury, is probably I could be wrong, but I think if you look at the current title reign of Roman Reigns, has he actually beaten Randy Orton?
No,
I don't think that match has happened yet. And if Randy
No.
Orton can get healthy enough, I mean, he's certainly if we're gonna look at this long list of Hall of Famers or future Hall of Famers that this title run has beaten, I think Randy Orton, if he can get healthy, is one of the biggest names missing from this list.
100%.
So,
100%. Yeah.
I think that would be a pretty interesting match, especially because the story is there, right? Like the bloodline took the Raw titles off of Riddle and Orton, so it's not like it's completely out of left field to do
Well,
that.
and that's what I was going to
Mhm.
say is that they're tying Riddle back into the bloodline without even real. I mean, like it was why Riddle was gone, basically, but they didn't really, finish anything out of that. So that's a perfect slot for Randy to just slide back in and be like, "Hey, I'm with Riddle, but I'm going after you, Roman."
I will also say the Riddle Solo little rivalry that's going on, I kind of do enjoy. I think it's something good for Solo to kind of get his first feud in. Like, I think those are awesome matches to have, but I think including Randy into the mix, I don't know what could go from that besides like, hey, maybe Randy loses and then you get a Randy Riddle feud, because I think that's kind of what it'd turn into.
Well, that I think that was the original intent. There was,
Right.
I think there was always eventually supposed to be an Orton Riddle feud story that we would get. That obviously we weren't able to see play out. But at this point, it becomes less about does it make sense for Randy Orton's character story to go for the title as much as does it make sense for Roman to add another name to the list? You know what I mean? Because
Right.
the cool part about Randy Orton is that he's at a point in his career where he can just go to the main event whenever he feels like it, and no one would question it for a second. If Randy Orton came on the show and was like, "I want a title shot," everyone would be like, "Okay."
Yeah.
It
That's
just,
all.
it just
That's all
makes
it takes.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
The
mean,
thing
you've
is now-
beaten everybody. You've beaten Cena. You've beaten Brock. You haven't beaten me. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
That's all.
Mhm.
That all it has to take.
The thing with Roman now is we knew after Mania he was meant to take a hiatus, but we also thought he was losing the belts to then take the hiatus, but that didn't happen. So the thing is, does Roman only come back for the Big Four as of right now? So like, is his next big thing going to be SummerSlam, then maybe Survivor Series, then maybe Rumble, or because like at that point with the same conversation of who's next on the list, does he have a next on the list until it's time for him to lose it?
It's a good question. I couldn't give you an answer because I thought that the title reign was ending at Clash of Castle last year. I thought it was ending at Mania. So I will say that I have been pleasantly surprised at the moxie to keep people guessing, because now it
Yeah.
really isn't when is this guy going to drop the title. It's like, Jesus, when is this guy going to drop
Yeah.
the title? I will credit them with that. I do think you got to get Randy on there. I do think you have to have another feud for him besides going right back to Cody. Even if people know that it's a holdover, like, you got to sell tickets. Like, let's see, that's your
For
boy,
sure.
that's your champ. Like, go put your champ on a show. If it's him and Randy on a random SmackDown for a big TV rating, do that. Like, that's fine also.
I was kind of going back in history and like trying to figure out who could have beat him too. Like, and I know we've talked about this, but Keith Lee was basically in that position to beat him when he was a part of the active roster. Of course, he got
Yeah.
released, plans changed. So I'm kind of trying to look into the future, like who outside could beat him.
Yeah.
I mean, Kenny, if somehow, some way that does get pulled off, Kenny Omega, in my opinion, is the only person who could beat him in like Vince and Triple H's shoes. But Cody, obviously, I mean, the reactions that we had should have
Yeah.
won.
Do we pull AJ Styles into this at all when he gets healthy?
I was thinking about AJ too. He's the other person that's in a similar Randy Orton area where if he decides he wants to be in the main event, he'll be there. Like he kind of gets to decide.
Because he's
Like,
on
I want
that,
a title match, and it just makes sense.
He's on that.
They have
draft
great chemistry.
graphic.
They have great
So-
chemistry together.
Right.
Payback 2016 was a show I went to. They had a great match there. They had a great
Yeah.
match then at Extreme Rules 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that would be a beautiful feud to hold us over.
A great callback to when AJ came into the WWE. That was
Yeah.
the first person that went face to face with him.
Well, and so at this point, it really begs the question. So there's the one question of who's next for Roman, but there's also the question of who's last for Roman during this. And I think a lot of people are. I'm in the camp of Cody. I think Cody Rhodes will be the ultimate, like, end of this road, even if it wasn't at this year's WrestleMania. I think Cody is the guy who's going to take the belts off of Roman. And I think, I mean, I've said it before, I don't see Roman losing those belts at not WrestleMania. I think it would be a
Right.
huge waste of a WrestleMania moment for whomever gets to do it to not have him lose the titles of Mania.
The only rebuttal I have to that is getting another heist of the century, which I don't want to take that away from Seth.
Yeah.
But say someone like LA Knight or someone gets it like that, I don't think it'll be someone taking it off Roman directly. But
Yeah.
it could be Cody's about to have his moment and he gets it stolen again.
But is that at WrestleMania or is that before WrestleMania?
I can see it as early as SummerSlam, but I don't know.
What if it's Theory? What if it's Theory or something like that? Just somehow.
No, they're not gonna have Theory win back-to-back Money in the Banks. He is finally doing well enough in the mid card that he doesn't need that shock value.
Right.
So, I mean, Joe. First off, Joey, do you think Cody Rhodes is the one who takes it off of Roman?
Yes, but they just should have done it. Is the
They should have ripped that Band-Aid.
They should just rip the Band-Aid. This is going to be my short answer because this is the reason I texted you that night. Here,
Yeah.
I understand the history of the Rhodes family. I understand Dusty never won the big one and kept constantly getting screwed over. I get that. People keep talking Cody, 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 Cody. It's not Cody that I'm irritated by with this result. It's Roman. It's the story of the bloodline. It was at a very clear divide at a point that we could take into very interesting directions. I thought it was very interesting for Roman to lose, the Usos to lose. What happens to the bloodline then? The
Yeah.
Usos lose, they remain loyal. Roman wins. We're right back at square one. And honestly, it looks like the Usos are getting those tag title back again anyway.
Eventually.
Because unless Sammy
be as
suddenly
early
wants to
as
start
this
going
Friday.
to Saudi Arabia, I don't know if that's going to be a thing.
That was my
And
guess.
so that's the part that irritates me. It's not that Cody lost. In fact, I thought Cody losing was a real wow, what a heartbreaker of a moment. And it does kind of make me root for the story a little bit. Will the moment get bigger than that? I don't think so. I don't think the guy can get more popular than he already is. And how great would it have been if his first title feud was this feud he has with Brock right now? That's
Yeah.
the main quick issue that I have is that the bloodline storyline has now, in my opinion, stalled. We're probably still going to get there, but it didn't need to get dragged out this long.
Yeah.
I found myself not wanting to watch more because of that, and because I thought, again, much more interesting for Roman. What does he do then? Now, what is his relationship with the Wise Man? Now, what's his relationship like with Jay and Jimmy, or Solo, or any of these guys? Like, to me, the storyteller in me says that this is where they were leading it. So then when it didn't happen, okay, that's fine. But I don't really like this Triple H answer where he's like, oh, just let the story play out. We do let you let the story play out, man.
Yeah.
And do you get us there? Yeah. But how many times has that been by accident or by happenstance? Okay.
Yeah.
Real quick. Rhea Ripley was not originally scheduled to face Charlotte. That just happened to be a fun little bow. And they could be like, oh, look, remember the story of her losing years ago? Because that's not what they really wanted to do. Same thing with Daniel Bryan. Same thing with Kofi. All of these things accidentally fell into their laps. So that's why it was more frustrating, because I was like, wow, look how perfectly constructed this bloodline storyline has been.
That's what I was thinking.
It's just frustrating. It's frustrating to watch, and it's the sad answer is because I love this thing very, very much. I work and cover it every single day. Aside from my acting duties, I do love the wrestling business, but the wrestling business always carnies out at the worst point.
Yeah.
Well, that was my thought. It was like you brought up a good point that the Cody story right now with Brock feels like it should be for the title, but it makes you wonder if that's what it should be. Like if he would have won on WrestleMania and then Brock coming out and going after him first because it's not against Roman, because he can't verse Roman for the title anymore, it makes perfect sense. But
makes
no,
perfect sense. Thank you.
It's because Brock had the top match on the card, and that's the only reason they could give Brock a reason to go after Cody for that.
Which is such a Vince reason.
There's also there's kind of another tidbit that I think a lot of people forget too, like with Solo interfering in the match. If you wanted to do anything, why didn't you make it Solo and Cody? Like, I get it if Cody has the title, totally Brock. Absolutely. That'd be perfect for him, especially in his first feud. But have Solo run in, it's like Cody going against Brock right now after this happened? Seriously? Like, that's kind of how I thought about it.
No, I agree, Eddie. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, are they going to get us there eventually? Yes, but
they have to.
I don't think the iron was going to be any hotter. My other main concern when looking at it was, okay, I understand you're telling a story, but here's the thing. Wrestling is very, very hard to predict long term like this.
Right.
You had your moment to crown Cody and you didn't take it. Okay. What happens if he gets hurt again? What happens if this story gets derailed again? Then do you push it to someone else? I mean, that's the thing. He's not like a young buck anymore. You know what I mean? Or a literal, not the young bucks, but like a literal young buck. He is aged, is the point I'm trying to make.
Definitely.
When you look at Roman Reigns right now, just in general, if you actually, so I was doing this a couple weeks ago with Clayton, ironically enough. If you actually look at the title history of Roman Reigns, it's actually insane. Do you know? So Roman Reigns currently, including his current title runs, 4-time WWE champion, 2-time Universal champion. I have the text here that I sent to Clayton after I did the research. No one has beaten Roman Reigns for a world title since June 2016. That is the last time Roman Reigns lost a world title in a match. So when you
who beat him, Randy? Who beat him?
That was Seth Rollins. So the thing is, so when you look at if you look at his 4 WWE title reigns, I think I have it in here too. He lost his first WWE title to a cash-in. He lost his second one in the Rumble, the one that Triple H won. And then the third one was Rollins winning. And his fourth one is now. So if you look at his 4 WWE title runs, only one of them was lost cleanly in a pin to Seth Rollins. The other one was a cash-in. The other one was the Rumble, right? That he almost still won. When you look at his 2 Universal title runs, the first one and now, who beat Roman Reigns for his first Universal title run?
No one did. He had to relinquish.
No one.
Yeah.
He
Oh, no, he
relinquished
did
it.
relinquish
Roman
it.
Reigns has never actually lost the Universal Championship. Roman Reigns, I think I summarized it here. Uh yeah, he hasn't lost it since 2016. And if you look at the Universal title, he hasn't lost it in like 4 years. Because if you look at when he won it at August, like I think it was August 2018 or something like that, and then he had to relinquish it a couple months later, and then he re-won it this time and has had it for almost 3 years. No one's actually ever beaten Roman Reigns for the Universal title.
So now pops the question at Royal Rumble 2022, why was that it for Rollins in that case? Well, I know kind of the build up with Cody kind of makes sense,
Yeah.
like for that, but like it just makes a lot more sense now, spitting the facts out. Like Rollins could be the guy.
It makes sense if WWE, and they've never been this smart. WWE has never been smart enough to look into its own history books to create a bigger story. But if you look at his 6 total title reigns, 2 of them that are consecutive right now, only one person has ever actually beaten him cleanly or in a normal circumstance, and that's Seth Rollins out of
Right.
6 world title runs.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
So when people want to argue about like Roman Reigns' goated status when it comes to being a world champion, it's almost inarguable.
No, it isn't arguable. I mean, the guy is potentially the greatest world champion the company has ever had. I think you could happily make that argument.
Yeah.
I'm sick of hearing Michael Cole list off Pedro Morales and Hulk Hogan and Bob and Bruno. Like we get it. I get it, Michael. He's closing on that title reign. Very good.
He's gonna knock Nash out of the top 5.
Well, I mean, and that's the long game of me finally getting revenge on that bastard. But like, listen, that is all legitimate. I have no problem with the Roman Reigns project and the Roman Reigns project paying off big time for them. It's amazing. But I'm hoping, I am praying that there is some kind of plan or idea post. You know what I mean? Because it's not just dropping the title and then he's done, unless he's done. Because if he's not done, you got to figure out what to do with this guy. Yeah. You know, it's one thing that is usually not my favorite WWE ism, which is a post world title run for a guy, because sometimes they don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, you saw it a lot with Cena whenever he would drop a belt. Whenever Cena would drop a belt, he would try to get a rematch, and it was only like if you look at like the hot potato era of like Cena, Orton, and Batista and Edge a little bit, like that time of those 4 kind of tossing the belt around with random people sprinkled in between. It was good for that era because you mainly had 4 the guys at the same time, where if Cena lost his world title to Edge, he could go over here to Batista or go over here to Orton and reignite that feud, and they kind of just went around for that set of years from like, I don't know, 2009 to 2012 or 2008 even to 2012. Like if you look at that time, but that's because they were all relatively equal. Like they were all relatively equal in that status that it would just, all right, if I'm done with you, I can go over here for a while. We can reignite, move on. Is there anyone on the roster currently at that same level with Roman that it would make sense for him to do that with?
I would say yes. I'd say it's Cody. And if if the showmanship or the presentation of Cody doesn't prove it to you, then the numbers do. House show attendance with Cody on it and Roman not on it is up year round in every single market. Going from the Midwest to the West Coast to the East Coast to those small little country towns, attendance is up with Cody Rhodes as the headliner on all of these house shows. Not Roman is there too once in a while, but when Cody is the one that has been advertised, house show attendance is up. That's your clear indicator. Number 1. Are you putting asses in seats? Yes. And Cody is a guy that's doing it. And he's presented at the same star level. So, it does seem like people are buying into the story, which is good. And I think a lot more people are giving WWE the benefit of the doubt because they know that eventually they're going to get the payoff. And I also know that eventually they're going to get the payoff. Is it going to be worth it? I don't think so. I mean, is it going to be worth it? Yes, it's going to be worth it. But is it going to be a greater moment than what they had at 39? I don't think so. But you know what? I hope I'm proven wrong.
I hope so too. I think at this point we can take a quick break. Because because I know Zoom's about to cut us off for just a minute. We'll go ahead and take a quick break, and then when we come back, we will dive into the draft, see where Cody goes, see where Roman goes, and we'll go into it from there.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, very good.
We'll be back in a minute, boys. All right, and we are back. Thank you for bearing with us while we go through that gap, but we are back in here to talk about the draft this time around. So right now, I think Eddie wanted to kick off some draft talk.
Yes. So this is a question for everybody, but I want Joey to give us the first answer, of course. In the history of the WWE draft, who has been or what has been your favorite draft pick and why?
I know my answer, but I'll let Joey go first.
It's a real good question. Let me give me a second to think on it. If Randy, you have yours ready to shoot, because I need a second just to remember my history really quick.
I can't tell you what year it was.
I'll tell you what year it was.
What?
I said I'll tell you what year it was.
You'll know what year it is because you're a freak like that. Whatever year it was that Triple H got drafted to SmackDown as World Heavyweight
2004.
Champion. The 2004
Yeah.
draft. That was insane because I think Evolution was still kind of a thing going on. They were fizzling out, but it was
Right.
still a thing. And Triple H, and doesn't he get redrafted back to Raw before the night is
He
over?
gets signed back. I don't think he got no, he didn't get redrafted. The only person who's ever gotten redrafted was John Cena when he got
And
drafted
that
to
was
SmackDown and
mine.
back to Raw.
Yeah.
Did I cut you? I'm sorry.
No, you're
It's fine. We'll just pretend like you didn't say that. My favorite draft pick was the look on everyone's face when Triple H as world champion got drafted to SmackDown. That was
My
that
favorite
was almost as good as when the Undertaker got drafted.
favorite part
during
about
the very
that
first
was
draft.
when he gets drafted, you can see Kane laughing in the background.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. Joey, do you have an answer? Do we want to kick it to Zach?
I cannot remember what year it was, but I'm gonna say here's the God's honest truth. My drop off from wrestling was during this draft era. So my first
okay.
draft that I saw when I was a fan again was probably the 2016 draft. But when I went back and I rewatched and I got familiarized, I still think having Cena that whatever year that he came out number one, with his spinner belt was probably my favorite.
Oh, that was
2005.
in St. Louis.
2005 draft. Yes.
The 2005 draft, and that was in St. Louis. He comes out in
Right.
the St. Louis Lindbergh jersey or whatever. The
Uh,
orange one.
Yes,
the
that's the one.
Spirit
that I'm
of St.
thinking
Louis.
yes.
Spirit of St. Louis jersey. Yeah, which is crazy because I have no idea.
I can't believe I remembered that.
Yeah.
It was for the XFL team that they have now. See, again, he's ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Cena.
Always ahead
Yes.
of time.
Mhm.
That's a good pick. Zach, what about you? Go ahead.
So mine was same being John Cena, but it was the year that he got drafted to SmackDown and then back to Raw on the same night.
That was really crazy. I
Yeah.
loved that actually.
It was a funny thing because John Cena was always told to be the Raw guy.
Yeah.
And then, well, after he got drafted to Raw the first time, he's basically on Raw from the rest of the time. But yeah, the whole thing of thinking of him going back to SmackDown and then shock factor, like, nope, sorry, not actually happening.
Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy. What about you, Eddie? What's your favorite draft pick?
Part of the same draft, John Cena with the spinner belt, and the reason why is because it kind of finally got his career kicked off for main title stardom, and that's Rob Van Dam getting drafted to Raw.
Oh yeah.
I
That
love
started that whole ECW one night stand thing later on that
Yes.
year, right?
love Rob Van
Yeah.
Dam, and him finally getting, even though it wasn't the coolest title reign he could have had, but him getting the Money in the Bank and then getting the world title, perfect.
Yeah.
A wonderful time. I don't know if you guys read an interview that Kurt Angle gave recently, but he was talking about working with RVD.
I did. Yeah.
And he's like, man, this dude was always good, but when he got really high, he was even better. I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
that's what I want to hear.
Which
That's
is
what I wanna
exactly
hear.
what you want to know about RVD in general.
I tell the same thing to my airline pilots. I was like, I know we're already high, but if you get stoned, we'll get
Yeah.
there soon, obviously.
Crazy. All right. Well, let's talk draft for a second for 2023. That's the year we're in, right?
Mhm.
2023. All right. So as we move forward with this draft, I know we've talked about in episodes past where we thought factions were going to go, where we thought individuals were going to go, but Eddie wasn't there. So
No.
Eddie, I want to know between you and Joey, and Zach and I will chime in as we see fit, but I want to know what are some of your top picks for Raw and SmackDown at this point? Where do you think we're going?
Joey, you can take the floor first if you'd like, because I have to think a
Joey, you
little
can go
bit.
first if you want.
If I'm being bold, I'm picking my boy Gunter at numero uno for Raw for the Red Brand.
Wow.
I think we're switching. My big prediction is that we're switching mid card titles to different shows. And I think I think you put Gunther on the Red Brand, get him on the flagship show,
That was
let
our
people
first
see him
prediction
every
too.
Monday night.
But you specifically say he's the first draft pick.
I think he's number one. I think you got to go number one.
That is
I
not
do agree with
bad.
that. I do very much agree with that.
And does he get
So-
drafted as Imperium or as just Gunther the Intercontinental?
That's what I was going to ask.
I say you draft Gunther as his own, and then Imperium can come in a later draft round. You know what I mean? You could even do a storyline where Gunther told Adam Pearce, like, if they don't come to Raw, like, I will straight up knife edge chop you in the ween. And then, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, which is a very valid threat. I think
Yeah.
anyone would do anything that Gunther
Oh,
wants.
it's
if he-
torturous. Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right. I think for me, I completely agree. Gunther number one. If I'm looking at SmackDown and SmackDown being on FX, you want to put the big stars on FX. I think realistically, Cody does need to go to SmackDown to put those big stars on SmackDown. And
I like it.
I was thinking about it too. I'm like, I thought Seth Rollins should be the third pick because I thought that made the most sense. But him going to Raw and not the big show, that just doesn't make sense. So I'm kind of stuck in between who that third pick should be.
Well, let me posit you this scenario for a second,
Okay.
because there's someone that I have in mind
Of
that I
course.
think played that exact role for SmackDown when SmackDown was the B show. During his time, no, I'm not doing a Nia Jax bit.
I thought he was doing a Nia
I'm
Jax
not
bit.
doing a Nia Jax bit right now. If you really think about it, that's the role that Edge played. Edge was this superstar, large in the life, great world champion. Obviously, everyone knew he was going to be a Hall of Famer, but he never, especially during his twilight, like the Vicky Guerrero time, basically after 2006, he did not spend a ton of time on Raw at all. He was him and Undertaker carried SmackDown.
Well,
for
you
a
know what my
really
favorite
long
part
time.
about that was about his runs more than anything is that when we had split titles,
Yeah,
he was on Raw. He was going for the WWE Championship. On SmackDown, it was like this is World Heavyweight Championship Edge, and there was almost like a complete two different sides to it.
yeah,
Right.
and most of the time he was on SmackDown with the World Heavyweight Championship. I think Seth Rollins could do that same thing for Raw. I think he could be the guy who's always in the main event, the guy who always represents, but is like the lead, almost the leader, if you will, of the B show. Especially with how long Rollins has, I mean, Monday Night Rollins, like that's his thing. So like keeping Rollins on Raw to me actually makes sense and puts him in that same spot that Edge had all those years ago with SmackDown.
I
So
agree.
Yeah, I like it. I really like it.
Also think Becky Lynch will be a high pick. I think she'll be top 5, honestly.
do you think she's the first women's pick?
I do think so. I absolutely think so. I just think with the track record she has and kind of what she's done, I do think whatever show Rollins is on, she will be on as well at the same time, though.
Keep them together.
I feel
That
like
makes
because
sense.
Rhea's established as Raw, they're gonna waste the first pick as her moving.
I was kind of thinking that too. They'll probably draft the Raw and SmackDown Women's Champions first. So I'll addendum my question to: is Becky Lynch the first non-champion
Yes.
pick?
Yes.
Yeah.
And yes. The big question that I have for everyone, and I want to start with Joey, is does Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn get drafted to the same show?
Well, I always go to what's more interesting. What's more interesting? Probably split them up. You know, I just don't know. The thing is that I love them as a tag team. I do.
I do too.
But I want to see. I mean, they're singles guys. You know, I want to see. You know, KO and Gunther. I want to see Sammy and Theory. Like, I want to see these guys fight for those solo titles. Like, they got their big moment. They got their tag title run. Do they want to keep competing as a tag team? Like, I'm going to be happy either way. But I think the more interesting thing is to split them up. And if you split them up, I think you put You keep Sammy on SmackDown, or you put him to SmackDown, because then if that's where Cody is, they can pick up with some of that,
Yep.
pre-Mania heat that was building between the two of them. And then
I
you have
agree.
and then you have KO, and he either goes back to being a fantastic heel or continues being a lovable babyface on Raw.
What about you guys? What do you think?
Uh, KO versus Gunther would be such a banger. I want to point
Yeah.
that out too. I do hope they get split up
Yeah.
because of that.
What about you, Zach?
My attached question to that, because we talked about this when we talked about the draft before, is that would the split result in them losing the titles? Though, I mean, we think about it as the Saudi thing, is that might be why they lose it to those for the time being. But our general consensus of it was that it would be cool because they would have kind of like separate lives outside of being the tag team, because they're the undisputed tag team champions, but they get to be the singles guys without being on the same show too. So they'll have their tag team
Yeah.
matches, but they'll have their singles too.
I have two things. The first is I understand why everyone is saying that Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn will lose the titles before the Saudi show. The thing that I want, the idea that I'm bringing forth based off of current WWE booking is that they could do literally what they just did with Becky, Lita, and Trish, and have Matt Riddle step in for Sami Zayn and defend those tag belts, except they successfully defend against the Usos. That way they don't have to drop those tag titles.
There's also, like, sorry, not to interrupt you. There's no like guarantee that they'll have a tag title match in Saudi Arabia. Like
Exactly.
they could easily
that's
win
true.
on Friday and then they just don't go on that show.
Yeah, they could
I
do
don't-
something like that.
yeah.
So that's my first thing. My second thing is the reason why I want them to get split up on separate shows is I want them to get split up on separate shows, but while still the tag team champions. And then the
That's what I was saying.
storyline becomes we are only able to stick together for as long as we can defend these titles. So that's our motivation to continue to defend these titles, and that's what would even give them the clearance and the green light to have a pretty lengthy title run, honestly, because they're fighting literally for their ability to stay together, because they know that their tag team, once they get split up in this draft, their tag team has a timer on it, and it's just them trying to extend that timer as long as they can. And that could take them all the way to like SummerSlam or Survivor Series if they really wanted to. In fact, if you kept it till Survivor Series and they did a Raw versus SmackDown type Survivor Series thing, instead of having the Raw tag team champions versus the SmackDown tag team champions, you make Sammy versus Kevin.
Oh boy,
You make them fight each
Randy.
other as the tag champions.
That is, as they say in my home country of Italy, a spicy meatball, because that
Yeah.
is wonderful. Like that is perfectly legitimate, makes sense, long-term booking storytelling that is going to be very interesting to watch on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and to like, and that's the skeleton. To see the meat and potatoes kind of attached to that over the next 6 months, like that is what's going to be really intriguing to me. Granted, I don't necessarily currently trust WWE to book that well. Not to say that I'm like this master booker or that I'm a wrestling genius. I am, but that's not what I'm saying. I think that it probably won't be that cool, but that's my fantasy booking. That's what I want to see. I want to see them get drafted separately, kind of go through that, and then realistically, depending on how that Survivor Series match goes, that's the crack that kind of starts. Well, do we even want to stay together because you kind of punched me hard or something?
Right. I also like the idea of them having a match against each other where it's like purely competitive and
Yeah.
like they
Right.
have a nice hug at the end of it.
Yeah, because they're the tag champions and there's no one for them to fight because they're both champions.
Right.
it's-
No, I
it's
love that.
unique.
But I also like the idea that there's been so many KO and Sammy matches throughout the years, throughout multiple promotions. But I don't really remember any that was just like, hey, like we're booked to face each other. It's always like, oh, I hate you and I'm gonna burn your house down.
Yeah, stuff like that.
So my question then, and I'll have Joey start for this, is the talks of why is Triple H saying that this is going to be a game-changing draft? And they're already speculating that there's going to be surprises with this draft too, but we always think that for any draft that comes up, and it turns out to be pretty lackluster. So my question is, do we get some form of swerve where there's another belt introduced? Do the universe or do the undisputed tag belts get split? Or what do we see coming from that side of things from a championship?
He's got something good. I can already tell. Randy's got.
It's a great question. I am gonna say that I have never gotten my hopes up too high anytime a pro wrestling company says this is gonna be a game changer, because
Yeah.
and that's not just a WWE thing. Trust me, it happens everywhere else.
Yeah.
But so what I'm assuming is that I think that in Trips's mind, he's going to finally have solidified rosters for each brand. That's going to make booking for him much cleaner and easier in the long run. I'm not expecting like a game changer type show. If I get one, that would be great. I just think like, we're going to finally have a lineup of like, we have Rollins and McIntyre and Gunther, and like all these heavy hitters on one show, and then you have the other show that's going to have all these different kind of heavy hitters. That's going to be more interesting for people to watch because maybe more unique, maybe more matchups. Like I'm hoping we can get like an Edge and Shinsuke matchup at some point, because man, those two guys have never been in the ring together, and that would be a lot of fun. Like things like that. In
Yeah.
the nature of, we're gonna have two solidified rosters, and it's gonna be, these are their brands. We're not messing with the whatever rules have been going on since the last draft, where there was a
The
draft.
wild card rule.
I mean, I haven't considered them two separate brands for years. You know what I mean?
Right.
I kind of like seeing the same people all the time. But if you're gonna do it the right way. Then
Do
you
it
know what I mean?
hard.
Do it hard. Do
Yeah.
it hard. Commit
Yeah.
to the thing. So that's what I think. But what about you guys?
I was kind of thinking about it, and also rebuttal question for you, Joey. Because if we do have these cleaner types of rosters, do you want to see everything go back to SmackDown pay-per-views, Raw pay-per-views? I also kind of want to get your take on that.
No, I like when they do. I mean, you could do the pay-per-view where you have you have guys on both shows, and if you want to do the same thing you do where you trade in and out with commentary teams, you can do that also.
I think that was the best version
Yeah,
of
I
that.
don't think we need to cram in an extra PLE every month. I think that's just going to make for lazy booking and harder booking. Because I'm going to say that I'm more of an AEW guy. I'm like a big guy for put really big matches on TV, put even bigger matches on your pay-per-views. But WWE's got a 12 pay-per-view system, so just use that to your advantage.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more.
I guess in my perfect scenario, it would go back to that Raw and SmackDown scenario, but it would be still only one pay-per-view a month, but that gives you months of build for each show, basically. So you would get the Raw or say SmackDown was Backlash, and then we had Money in the Bank be a split pay-per-view, and then you go back to a Raw pay-per-view, and then SummerSlam's a split pay-per-view again, just like the big four being the merged ones, and then you have your individualized pay-per-views after that.
I don't know if I agree, because I'm kind of with I am with Joey on this in terms of like lazy booking. Like you can only stretch a storyline out so much. And like if you're gonna have a build for a WWE title match, and I think we kind of got a lot of this in like that 2004, 2005 era where it's like not a Raw pay-per-view happening, let's say go building into a SmackDown, but we're seeing Triple H and Randy Orton battle it out.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, they are milking this. Yeah.
Yeah.
That too, because the other side of it is that they're really pushing that this is where Triple H finally takes full control. So it makes me wonder what
Hopefully.
I understand, Randy, but
Yeah.
my hope is that this is where the outshining of what the creative process was meant to be since he's taken over.
Yeah, I think at this point, I think that when he says it's a game changer, he doesn't mean on screen. I think it means behind the scenes. So I think that with this, I think the pay-per-view structure doesn't need to be Raw and SmackDown different, but they can be Raw and SmackDown centric.
Right.
Like there can be, like, you could have one pay-per-view where the main event is Bianca Belair with the Raw title, and then the next pay per view could be the main event is Rhea Ripley with the SmackDown title. Like you could go that route because
Mhm.
Roman Reigns at this point is not going to be at every pay per view.
Mhm.
Like that's just a given.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I
Um,
always loved about Tripps's booking from NXT, like one of the reasons I loved NXT going up to the takeovers is in prep for the takeover, the final TV episode of NXT was still like some feud ending matches. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they still had things that they built up to a point where you're kind of getting a lot of the talent that wasn't on that takeover card are going to then get featured on that television before. So like you could still, so I'm hoping that that's sort of a thing that can get incorporated where if you're not making it onto the card, I think they did this a little bit in builds to WrestleMania. Like they had the battle royal, but they had some matches, some singles matches that like
Yeah.
obviously couldn't make the Mania card. Perfect. Put it on, give it that TV time that it has a chance to.
Yeah.
And I think if you do this thing, if you do the pay-per-view idea where it's just brand specific pay-per-view, it's going to be hard because then you're going to force things on there that probably aren't ready for that spot, or you're forcing it on
Yeah.
there just to have filler. And like, I don't think they're at a point now where you just want to have filler. Like you need to be putting on the best potential card every single time you can because you have the talent to do it.
Especially now, right? Like this is probably the most in-depth we've seen the roster in a very long time.
Counterpoint now, because at least from what I've seen, Endeavor does want people to be released. I don't know if that's like completely true or not,
Oh,
but there was
yeah, they are talking about budget cuts and trimmings and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, Nick Khan said number two.
50 million. Yeah, I saw that.
So I
So
mean, there's probably going to be some edges cut off. Like I mean, from the people who you haven't seen in a while, they're probably going to be gone, and it's probably
I
going to
mean,
be who's left that's been working left to work and bring this next you know generation of WWE up.
I hate to say it, but I think that there is some fat to trim around Raw and SmackDown, but most of that has to come from NXT, right? Like I guarantee if someone goes to the NXT books and rosters and looks at, progress and TV time, like that's probably where they could find not most, but a lot of that money.
They'll probably cut a lot of the performance center, like people who aren't necessarily gonna make it to the side of it because
Yeah.
they have that open for a lot. So like people make it through a tryout and then they'll have a performance contract. That's just wasted money from WWE if they're never gonna get somewhere. So
Yeah, like they'll probably, I don't want to say get full blown audited, but Endeavor's going to send someone to go look at NXT, and I'm very afraid of what that's going to look like for NXT. Granted, I've been saying it for weeks now. I think NXT needs to get off TV and go back to streaming. I think they could save a lot of money by just not having NXT on USA.
well, I
yeah.
mean that might be something that comes up with the TV rights deals, especially with NBC not being in the picture anymore and potentially going back to the pay-per-view structure of buying pay-per-view. Like this might
Yeah.
be a couple year down the line thing, but with where the next homes for Raw and SmackDown are going to be, we might not see NXT as part of that.
Yeah.
I definitely have a big question in regards to that. And Joey, I'm really putting you on the spot right now.
Yeah,
Who
give it to me,
is
Daddy.
one big or one big name, NXT, SmackDown, or Raw, that you feel would get cut and why?
One big name from NXT that would get cut.
Yeah, definitely.
Or anything WWE.
Anything? I have one specifically, but
Bray Wyatt.
Yeah, Bray Wyatt would be
Bray
the
Wyatt.
first one.
It's super 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 unfortunate, but it's a lesson that as wonderfully unique and absolutely creative this person is, they are no longer catering to a pro wrestler. They are catering to a performance artist. And that's fine. I'm a big performance artist myself. But eventually, the thing that worked so well with Cape Fear Bray is that he wrestled matches. I don't know what they're paying him when they brought him back, but I don't think that it's going to be people are going to accept that this guy is getting a great deal of money and he's barely on TV.
Right.
Yeah, the return on investment there has to be awful at this point.
It's
wanna
just,
know-
but it's frustrating
Maybe
because
because his merch sales are probably crazy. I'll take
sure his
that
merch-
back.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I don't even, but they're not they're not Fiend 2019 numbers. I know that,
Definitely
and they're
not.
not
Right.
No way.
they're not Wyatt family numbers. Those numbers belong to the Bloodline and Cody Rhodes in terms of merch. And I guess I just want to ask the question to all of you guys. Like, listen, I've always been a big Bray Wyatt supporter, but do we see a future for this guy who is very, very difficult to book around due to the limitations of his creativity?
I'm going to kind of look at it more on the injury perspective, because if that guy was on TV, or like we would have had a Lashley versus Bray, and that probably would have been really good. But I'm kind of looking in terms of like, he's such a awesome piece to use, and it's kind of the same with like when Samoa Joe was in the WWE. Like, he's such an awesome piece to use, and you can do so much with him. But he's so injury prone. Like, we can't put him on TV for something good and just something to really get him over the top, which is why they ended up releasing him. And I feel like in that case, if he keeps getting injured and with these cuts coming up, he probably would be one of the first people on the chopping block, and that probably would save a ton of money, because I feel like he's getting paid a fair amount.
What about you, Zach? What do you think?
The big thing
Because
for me,
I'm actually really interested in what you see because you're the biggest Bray Wyatt fan I know.
yeah, because I'm probably the most disappointed person too, because I was super excited. I was almost at tears with his
Yeah,
at Extreme, and the overwhelming part of it all is that we know, or we get told, that his hiatus is due to a physical issue, but then he gets seen around WrestleMania and all these places and he looks fine. Yeah, very much well, it could be an underlying issue that you don't see from the outside, but my big thing is that they, whether it's a Vince thing, whether it's a Triple H thing, whether it's no one understanding what he wants, whether it's him booking himself into a corner, whatever happened between his magic return and now just completely went off the rails. LA Knight was already a weird feud, but we got through it, and then it looked like something was coming out of that.
yeah.
And now we were going to either get Bobby Lashley or Brock Lesnar for what this character was going to be. It wouldn't have made sense. But again, no one who versus Bray is meant to look good out of it, unfortunately.
And
And
Brock
that's just
said
kind of what
no.
it came to. Right.
Yeah.
Clearly. And that's the unfortunate part, is that the story is amazing. Alexa liked working with Bray. Bray's mind is magic, but it just doesn't work anymore, because just as Randy has said now, is that the supernatural gimmicks just don't work anymore.
He's 30 years too far ahead of him, or 30 years behind. He's too late. Everything that he like, picture a 1993 Undertaker just getting dropped into WWE right now. That's essentially what it was. And I mean, granted, the specifics of the character of Dead Man versus Supernatural, here's my 6 ghostly friends, like, that part is different, but essentially the same part of, if you take this overtly supernatural character and drop it into a modern wrestling or WWE, it just does not fit. It's not that type of show anymore. And so that's Bray Wyatt seems to be coming to light that Bray Wyatt is the kind of person that is, if this can't be done the way he sees it or wants it to be done, he's not going to do it. And unfortunately, even the Mountain Dew pitch black match was a stretch. It is almost impossible to do this the way that he wants to do it in a WWE situation.
I'm going to disagree on one aspect, and that's that it can't still happen, or that there's no place for it now. I do think that there's a place for some of this supernatural funisms, because, like The Undertaker, it's become a staple in the industry when it's done well. The Wyatt family was a perfect example of it being done well. There was supernaturalism, but it was built around the context of a wrestling show and having wrestling matches and wanting to win wrestling championships.
Yeah.
I think House of Black in AEW is killing this aspect. There's a supernatural element to it, but they're there to wrestle matches. They're there to win titles. They're there to have stories. It's not this other type of world where you're fighting in demons and somehow people just get in the way of your story. And that's my main is
that's what
Bray's
Bray's trying to do at this point.
It didn't seem like Bray Wyatt was feuding with LA Knight. It seemed like Bray Wyatt was telling a story and LA Knight just kind of got thrown into the mix. And again, I agree with what Zach said. His mind is brilliant. He's a fantastic storyteller. But in the context of a pro wrestling show, that's what's not working. And it's a shame because I thought Bray Wyatt was always a good worker.
He is
I always
a great
knew
worker.
he knows you know what I mean? Like a guy his size, he moves well. He's got an amazing finisher. He knows how to work power games. He knows how to work as a babyface. Like it's becoming overcomplicated. And I think it could be so much easier. Not that he has to revert backwards, but you have to get back to there. I'm Bray Wyatt. I'm a wrestler. I'm here to win championships, and I'm able to channel this supernaturalism, which Undertaker did too. Because if Undertaker only cared about that, he wouldn't have been champion as many times as he was.
Right.
Well, that's the sad part to it. So the sad part to it is that when he came back, the storytelling that he was giving off was like, here's the real me again. And it looked like he was going to get to probably another supernatural character at some point, but it was like, I'm fighting myself type thing. But I was all for Bray Wyatt having a internal feud with himself that made him like a menace towards everyone else, but not bringing in Uncle Howdy and all these other characters that we're planning to bring in. Now, if this Wyatt Six thing ever came to fruition, whether it was again booking issues on his side, booking issues, or if it was never the plan in general, if he came back with all these promos and it led to him just going absolutely nuts, it was just Bray Wyatt against himself, and everyone else was at fault for it, then I would have been a lot happier with it.
Yeah.
The one thing that just popped into my mind when you said that was Al Snow throwing himself through a table.
Yeah. That's a great moment.
Al Snow versus himself.
Peak wrestling right there. Not even peak cinema is what that was.
Yeah.
That was art, peak art, if you will. Okay, well, any other last minute predictions at this point for the draft before we wrap up?
I mean, nothing too crazy. Call-ups wise, I think it'd be kind of dumb not to bring Braun Breaker up.
If he's going to be done with his heel feud by the time it's all said and done.
I think he doesn't need... I think this should just be build up for him to go to the main roster, because it doesn't sound like he's going to... well, he actually is fighting Andre Chase at the next pay-per-view.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't see where else you could go with that. Like, just leave it at that. You're not going to fight Carmelo Hayes again. Bring him up.
Him and Cora Jade are the only two that I see right now that I could see getting called up. And Cora Jade's a stretch. I just think... that's
He's
just
in the
me
title
personally. I
feud
think
right
I
now.
like it.
There's one other person, and you guys may not know as much about it, but I think she's very good, and that would be Zoe Stark.
Oh yeah.
I totally think she's ready. She's and she was in there longer than Roxanne Perez was. So I'm like, I totally think she'd be ready for something up there. Give her a little bit more of her own, give her a personality, and she's up. She can go far.
Well, we can see her. Go ahead, Joey. What do you think?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that there's someone on the NXT roster who I think is ready for the main roster. I just don't think it would make sense to call them up now because I don't know where you put him. I think Grayson Waller is ready. I think you put him up there. I think the guy could talk. I think he's got enough charisma, enough attitude. The problem is that I don't know where he falls into the mix at the moment. So, probably keep him in NXT for a little bit.
That would be a mistimed call up where he just gets lost in an early mid card.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to pair him with someone. I mean, this dude's kind of got like the Aussie theory, MJF. Like I could talk.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
I don't need to have a bunch of writers. You just put me in the ring with a microphone, and I'll tear him down. But do they have room for that right now? I mean, maybe. Maybe if they give him the shot, but
Yeah.
so that's someone who I think should get called up, but probably won't. But other than that, I don't think I have any other
Yeah.
wild predictions.
What about Eddie? Last thoughts?
I'd wait till AJ Styles gets healthy, continue that feud. Honestly, between Grayson and AJ.
Grayson and AJ.
Yeah,
That would be good.
definitely.
Yeah, I mean, if AJ comes back in time, they could call him back and reignite that. But awesome. Well, that's gonna wrap up everything for this episode. Joey, thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you,
time
boys. This was
Yeah.
such a pleasure. I mean, all three of you, so handsome, and to bring
Oh
me
my
on,
God.
it's
Look at
truly,
this.
truly a
Gorge.
gem of a time I had. So thank you so much. My favorite wrestling podcast out there.
Well, thank
Heck
you.
yeah.
Go ahead and take us through some of your upcoming projects. What do you got? What do you want to talk about? What do you want the people to know about?
Well, listen, this is a wrestling pod, so I write for a website called Wrestling Headlines, and you could find all of the exclusive interviews I've done on WrestlingHeadlines.com or the Wrestling Headlines YouTube. You could see me have chats with the likes of Ken Shamrock, Brandy Rhodes, Bobby Fish, PJ Black, Matt Cardona, all Nick Aldis, all these guys in the industry that are making waves. So you can check that out at the Wrestling Headlines YouTube. And I got an interviews coming up with the creators and developers of WrestleQuest, new RPG video game, as well as DDP and Jeff Jarrett. So all of that can be found at WrestlingHeadlines.com. In the
Big
meantime,
names.
please continue to subscribe to this podcast. It's the best wrestling podcast out there with the three best hosts that you could have.
Well, thank you so much, Joey. Like I said, we really appreciate your time. Zach and Eddie, any other last thoughts before we jump out of here?
You can take us through socials. I'm blanking.
Take us through the socials.
YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts now. There's not a third one anymore, so
Yeah.
it's just those two. But of course, keep continuing to support the podcast, support Mr. Joey as well on his journey, and see you guys in the next episode.
Awesome. Well, we've been Randy, Zach, and Eddie. Joey, this is absolute beautiful stud. Thank you for
Best
spending
guest
some time with us.
ever.
And we'll see you soon, guys. Thanks.